to tell you the beginning of my story, because I believe it predicted an unusual life. I was born in India on the dining room table by the light of a hurricane butty in the foothills of the Himalayas, and travelled a lot around, unschooled, except my mother taught me to read when I was 3, and of course could count and do all these sort of things, and speak Urdu and Hindi, which became almost my first languages. Anyway, I lived there till I was 7, but on my 6th birthday, just as I was cutting the cake, Bombay Harbour blew up. Stars, lights. I thought it was the best party I'd ever had. But of course, it was a tragic, tragic event with many, many people died and the harbour completely flattened. Anyway, when I was just 7, my brother and I were shipped to England, and we were in a children's home in Devon for the next 4.5 years. And there, in the children's home, it was very undisciplined. We ran wild. I ran wild on my own over the moors, pretending I don't know what, that I could fly, jumping off tin roofs. I remember having taken the umbrella and it turned inside out, to my horror. So that was my beginning, wildness. And then I was forced into a straitjacket of a very British public school where I was totally not suited to me. They thought I had no grounding. They thought I was some sort of uneducated fool. So that was a very bad schooling for me. Anyway, I survived it, became a speech pathologist, and although I was loving to draw and to make little things on my own free time, and I got married, I followed the regular path, got married, had 2 children, blah, 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 travelled the world because my husband was in the Navy, and eventually got divorced, and it was time for me to develop my own interests. So in America, at first I was going to be a speech pathologist, as you call them here, but I had not the American qualifications. So although I loved the work, I decided it was time not only to change location, but also what I did. And this was in 86. I began my new life here in 86. And from there, I had a car wreck and decided that, and I was getting older, and the steel that I was working with as a sculptor became just too heavy. And so I changed to writing. I admired my friends that had studios and quiet, and they could play music while I was out there bang, 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 and not welding, but cutting with a plasma cutter and doing heavy work. Anyway, I decided then it was time to write, but I'd never written anything, and I had my father's notes that he was long dead, sadly, and his notes read like a military report. Went into the desert at Lehi, 40 miles. Finish. And he'd hoped to publish it and call it Memoirs of an Eccentric Colonel. Anyway, not having written a word, I joined the Southwest Writers in Albuquerque, which is a wonderful writing group. And from them, I learned every single thing. I learned about an arc, I learned about protagonist, POV, all these things, reversal, things I'd never heard of. So I thought, I'm a late developer, it's very late in life, too late to find an editor, impossible. Forget a publisher, impossible. Although my stepfather actually was quite well known very well known, John Masters. He wrote about Bhuwani Junction, The Deceivers, 20 books about India. So I sent up the book backwards and forwards until finally it won first prize, my version, and I'll show it to you. This is it. Not very professional looking. And people told me the feedback was that that looked like some English knight in armour, when in fact it was the Rani Jhansi, the warrior queen, who I regret to say was captured by one of my ancestors. And I found that statue in the flea market, not knowing its connection to me or my family. Anyway, so here is version number 2. So now I started to write in earnest, and that was my new life. And my husband sadly then developed Parkinson's, and I had to give up writing what I call long work, because you'd have to run to help him, and you couldn't if your hands are covered in clay and all that sort of thing. So I wrote a blog. So people say, what genre do you write? I say, well, I've written about India, I've written about caregiving, I've written 2 poetry books. Well, one's a chapbook, and here's this one, the latest, and then children's stories, and then biographies, one about Spain and one about a new American arriving in this country and the sort of weird things that happened. And that one is called The Long, the Short and the Tall, because some stories are a little bit tall. Anyway, that is about all I have to say. That is a biography, hopefully, and I hope you'll look up my website. Thank you.